We got it, Marty.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. Then I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order and apologize. I just told Paul before the meeting that I'm going to get a bad rap because I have 8 o'clock in the morning finance committee meetings and now 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, a workshop. But I think it's important, and I'm glad you all made time to be here. We'll take a moment to reflect before we adopt the agenda. Thank you. And we do have only one action item, and it's to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented today?
Move the motion. Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, great. Jody, remind us about our responsibilities under the sunshine.
Thank you, Ms. Lanahan. Jody Brooks here, Office of General Counsel, JEA Chief Legal Counsel. The proper notice for this meeting, it's a special meeting of the JEA Board for the purposes of conducting a workshop to provide additional information on JEA's Pay for Performance program has been published. The meeting is permitted to be conducted by Communication Media Technology pursuant to the Florida Executive Order 2069. The Emergency Management COVID-19 Local Government Public Meetings Executive Order. Minutes of this meeting will be taken and published. And although this is a workshop to which that no action other than the adoption of the agenda has taken place, there is a quorum of the board present, and we're in good, proper order to conduct this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jody. And to everybody, before I pass it over to Paul and Angie, I want to let you know that in the Finance Committee meeting, we decided that it might be worthwhile to have a workshop around pay for performance, especially as it relates to the history of the program, any controls that we might want to recommend, any disclosures that we want to make relative to what we anticipate paying, which you'll hear is a little bit of a challenge. You'll hear that later in the agenda. There's a third item that's come up that we'll address later in the agenda. But I do want to make sure that you understand this is purely a workshop. And if there are any action items, then we would address those at the June board meeting. So since this is information only, Paul, I'll turn it over to you and then over to Angie.
I've been with JEA for a number of years now, and we have always had an incentive compensation program of one size or the other. And it dates back to 1992. And, during that period of time, it has, I think, improved in its governance in terms of its policy and procedures, in terms of just the awareness of the board and the community in terms of what the metrics are and that we measure against. And clearly, after we came out of the recession in 8, 9, and 10 and restarted this program, it was absolutely there to drive performance, to create cost savings. And when cost savings compared to budget were created, an incentive pool was created, and out of that, funds were distributed. And they were against specific measures of performance for the organization. So I think that we had a good program up until, I believe, last year, where there was 2 years ago an authorization change in terms of the approval of the plan and then the subsequent disbursement of funds. But I think there was a conflict last year in the way people that participated in the plan were the ones that designed the plan and approved the plan, and say that never happened prior to my time there, whether it was me or any one of my predecessors. So I know that's caused some deep concern, but I'm here to say that when we look at some of the reasons for this and the specific thoughtful compensation structure and delivery and the professionals that we had. And when you get a sense of looking at the worksheet that supported the goals, the tracking, the monitoring, the measurement, and ultimate payment, I think you'll get a sense of comfort. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angie, and Angie will run through a portion, and then we've got Pat Nellis, who's Director in Employee Services, and Jody will talk about some legal constructs with respect to the Florida statute. And then near the end, we do have to talk about sort of this year and next year with incentive compensation for employees. So Angie, why don't you pick it up here?
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, Board of Directors and other participants. I'm Angie Hires. I rejoined JEA last week. I previously served as the Chief Human Resources Officer from January 2013 through the 1st of April of 2019. I'm glad to be back and just really excited about being able to contribute during this period. What I intend to do is to go through the agenda items that have been assigned to me. I'll be very brief in my explanations, as I do understand that there's been an hour that's been allotted to this. So I'll go through the information to make sure that we have adequate time for the board to have discussion. And Sean, if you will for me, I believe that you have the PDF, because there are some particular documents in here that I won't go through, but they're just there for mere reference points. I'll indicate the page number. So if there are participants that are also following the PDF, that they'll be able to refer to those pages as well, if that's okay. Okay. JEA has achieved some significant improvements in organizational performance for years, and we feel that it's in part due to establishing performance measures that engage all employees and incent them to do their best work. JEA has had such an incentive program since 1990. Although this program has had various iterations to cover different situations, there are two things that have remained pretty constant and intact. One of those things is the fact that performance incentive compensation is paid from annual operating and maintenance expense savings, and another, the four key areas on which we focus. Those four areas: safety. Safety is a way of life at JEA. There is no compromise with that at all. Cost savings, where we're fiduciarily responsible, and we acknowledge that we are responsible to our ratepayers. Customer satisfaction, making sure that we're delivering quality service and product, and operational excellence. We strive to be the best that we can be, and we want to be world-class in our industry. Sean, if you could go to slide 4. The next item that you will see in the packet is a chart that depicts the history of the program and the JEA board action items that were taken regarding incentive pay at JEA. While I won't go down the entire chart, I will bring your attention to some particular dates that are contained within the chart. The first one that I will reference is May 2001. I reference this particular date because you will see on the following slide a chart that there seems to have been a significant payout. One of the things that you will note in the explanation for that is that this was a very peculiar year where the board actually approved a modification of the appointed pay plan that would include an incentive payout, but something that had occurred for the past 3 years were pay freezes. And at this particular point in time, as well as paying the short-term incentive, there was actually payments made as a part of this program to, per se, close the gap where there had been salary freezes. The intent of this was to not increase payroll dollars and expenses, but to give one-time pay that would not be compounded year over year, and actually using some of the savings and dollars to fund that. So you will see that noted on the next slide in the graph, and wanted to make sure that there was some definition as to why that number seemed to be an outlier. The next date that I'll bring your attention to is the 2009-2011 timeframe. This is during the time period when the program was actually suspended for a period. This was due to financial crisis, and at that time, the decision was made to not move forward with the program. In December of 2015, which is the next date that I'll bring your attention to, this is a time frame where, once again, the board and the organization took a look at the design and construct of the incentive plan and decided that it was appropriate at that time to have the plan consist of two separate components. The first component consisted of goals and metrics that were set company-wide, in which all employees of the organization, be they appointed employees or civil service employees, would partake in that particular section of the incentive plan. What was added that year was the part of the program that rewarded appointed employees. The reason that this became a part of the program is in 2015, because once again, because of the pay freezes, as well as the contractual agreements with the bargaining unit, there came to be a lot of pay compression as well as gaps in compensation between our bargaining unit employees and our appointed employees. It became a concern for retention because during that time period, there was an expected possible turnover of 15 to 20% of employees who were eligible to retire. We were also concerned about attracting employees and making sure that we had a competitive package. So again, that second portion was added to help close the gap between the total compensation package for appointed employees, as well as to make sure that we were able to attract, retain the talent that we needed for the organization. The last date that I'll bring your attention to on this particular graph is on October 2019. No approval was provided for the CEO for the fiscal year 2019-2020 for the Pay for Performance program, and we'll see more documentation related to this item further along in the presentation. If we take a look at slide 5, this is more of a picture graphical view of the Pay for Performance program. It sort of takes a look at the savings as well as any payouts for the time frame of 2000 up through this past October of 2019 for a payout. One of the things that I'll bring your attention to are the footnotes at the bottom of the page. For 1990 to 1999, although there was a program, financial savings data were not available for that time period to include in this report. On the next slide 6, this is a chart that depicts the program from 2009 through 2019. As I mentioned before, the program was suspended for that 3-year period and then reinstated back in fiscal year 2012. Again, in 2015, the program had some amendments to encompass the appointed team, which was directly a reflection of performance by our appointed population. Next in the packet, starting on slide 7 and 8, this is actually a document that is presented to the board. This particular program summary pretty much lays out what the goals and objectives are for the plan. It also indicates on an individual basis for bargaining units and other salary grades within our organization what the payout would be at a meet or exceed level. And on that second page, there's also a summary that indicates at different levels of achievement at meets or exceeds what would the expected payout would be, so that the board would be aware that if different goals are met or exceeded, what the percentage of payroll would be for that incentive compensation payout. And this is included each year in the board packet as the plan is presented to the board for approval. And I'll move on to the next section, which is the review of the board's approval of the CEO's compensation authority. Back at a November compensation committee meeting, it was brought to the attention of the current board members that since February of 2010, there had been a document that gave authority to the CEO to set compensation for the organization. That particular policy was reviewed, examined, and then reaffirmed that the CEO had the authority to set compensation for the organization. This document that's currently on the screen is the minutes, from that December 12, 2017 board meeting. The following document is actually the board document that was submitted in the package, along with a copy of the policy for your reference. And then on page 15 is actually a memorandum that the Chief Human Resources Officer submitted to the CEO and Managing Director, which was actually confirming the affirmation of the resolution by the board. Also stating that the plan would be communicated within 24 hours after the CEO approved it, but most of all, making sure that we were acknowledging that the plan would be administered per the procedure that was set in place that governs such incentive plan. Now, if Ms. Lanahan is in agreement, I'll turn it over to Pat Malis. Again, Pat Malis is our Director of Employee Services. She oversees compensation for the organization. She's a very recognized compensation professional, both in our immediate area and nationally. Pat, if you would please proceed.
Sean, is Pat muted?
Pat
Sean, can everybody hear me?
We got you.
Can
Can you hear me? All right, thanks. It would help if I unmuted myself. All right, thank you, everybody, and good afternoon. Angie has hit on a lot of the high topics as it relates to compensation, but I think it's real important to understand that our total compensation philosophy is designed to cover some key factors, and that is to attract, retain, and reward a highly technical and specialized workforce within JEA. And there's a few methodologies that we use to attain that, and we want to make sure that our compensation is internally equitable, externally competitive, and appropriate for the market for JEA, which JEA operates within. It's a very important point. Driven by excellence in performance and safety, which Angie talked about, and ensuring that we deliver based on the company's financial ability to pay. But I'll go back to the one item, externally competitive and appropriate for the market that JEA operates within. And so, you know, when we look at our board manual and it talks about how our total reward package will include salary, wages, incentives, and a variety of different types of benefits, it states very specifically that we will be at the 50th percentile of the market. And what that means is that's the going rate. That's the average rate for that particular job in the marketplace. And we want to ensure that, you know, in order to attract and retain a variety of different individuals, that compensation package does need to look as competitively as possible. But we also have to remember the organization and the industry for which we work in. And I will specifically state we have to understand that we do work in a government public sector environment. And so there are limitations in terms of how we operate and what we can provide. And so we don't just do this in a vacuum. We partner with other LPPC, which is the large public power companies in the nation, and we understand how they're compensating their professionals, and we want to ensure that we're able to actually retain our professionals, because believe it or not, California might be recruiting a Jacksonville lineman, which they did this last year, to go after and preserve and restore the utilities out in California after the fires. And they were paying a very, very competitive rate. But we have to balance that, and we have to think about where we are in the marketplace. So, you know, when we talk about short-term incentives, our base salary, you know, we've strived over the last several years to make sure we're competitive. And that means that we're at least able to recruit at the market rate, as going rate. But when it comes to incentives, it's real important. Most companies use incentives as a tool to incent performance within the company. It's the metrics that we talked about earlier, things like cost controls and operational excellence, those items are very standard components of an incentive compensation, and it gets the employees' vision aligned with what the company's goals are in the organization. And so, again, we have gone out and tested or surveyed, I'll say, other companies in our industry, and it's not uncommon to see short-term incentives. It's not even uncommon to see them in the government sector. But we're talking short-term incentives. Long-term incentives are a whole different story, and they are not common. And so this is why JEA has not traditionally used long-term incentives. We know that in the public sector, we use different accounting procedures, and we measure our financial abilities. And I'm not a financial person, so excuse me if I don't use the right terminology, but we don't measure ourselves in the same way as a private sector or investor-owned utility. So this is primarily what our goals are as it relates to the Pay for Performance program. I'll turn it back to Angie.
Okay, and I'll defer to Board Member Lanahan.
Yeah, well, I think we could pause for a moment before we move. I think the next slide discusses the statutes. Are there any questions from my fellow board members at this time?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Why did we go to a scenario where the CEO is designing the bonus program that he participates in? That strikes me as not only dangerous, but really makes him susceptible to a lot of criticism. I don't understand why the board doesn't approve the thing as suggested by the CEO.
And having been involved with this in the past, I will tell you that we always spoke about the plan, but I think you've picked up on one of the control items that I think we should put in place, because it is inappropriate for the CEO to set their own compensation. But we did discuss it in previous board meetings in executive session. So it was always fully disclosed, but I think to protect ourselves in light of candidly what's happened in the past, the board should set all of the CEO's compensation packages, including not limited to the incentive plan.
I agree with that.
Madam Chair, if I may jump in terms of the approval granted CEO was for the compensation for the JEA team, not for the CEO. And so at least the intent when that was approved by the board was that the CEO had their compensation and incentive and other activities approved by the board, and that was it. The CEO did not participate in any other incentive compensation, especially given the fact that the CEO is designing it. The last go here in 2019, that changed, and there was a breakdown absolutely in control, and a conflict emerged. So any recommendation to strengthen that and move that back to the board certainly will be a good one.
Yeah,
Hey, Marty.
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, so sort of in line with, I think, John Baker's question, and maybe this is for Angie. Is it normal for the senior leadership team to be part of recipients of the compensation, or is that meant for a lower level within the workforce?
It is not uncommon at all, but it's specifically designed to include different levels of the organization. It is not typical for the CEO to be in the same plan as the other employees and fire.
Okay, thank you, Angie. I appreciate it.
Madam Chair,
Madam Chair.
Bailey, maybe I missed it, but who is actually eligible? At what, from CEO down to what level is eligible for the
Angie, did you hear the question? It's the question was around who was exactly eligible.
Okay, all employees in the organization, with the exception of the CEO, is eligible under the current plan that was in place in previous years, up through the past year, fiscal year of 2018-2019. That would include the senior leadership team, as well as all employees within the JEA organization.
So roughly the 1,900 to 2,000 associates, correct?
Exactly. And each plan summary that was submitted to the board for approval of the plan before it was presented to employees and as well at payout would indicate levels of achievement as well as the breakdown of the employees by job grade.
And there was an important number. If you, I want to make sure I saw the number correctly, Angie. Did I see that on average this is less than 2.5% of total salary expense? It was like 2.3, I think, in the package.
Yes, that is correct.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Of course.
One, just clarification, we talk about appointed employees. Is that the same as salary?
Yes, it is.
And there are a number of consultants, I don't know if it's consultants, but people that are not employees of JEA, but that work with them side by side every day. What do you call those people?
We call those employees either contractors or variable labor employees. And they are not.
Do they participate?
No, they, according to the eligibility rules that were established for the plan, contract workers or variable labor or temporary employees are not eligible for the incentive plan. Okay.
And lastly, and I'm not looking at the right sheet now, but it broke down how much that the various levels get. And it's clearly, it may be 2 or 3% in total, but the higher people get a good bit more as a percent of pay than the rank and file. Is that not true?
So it's based upon a percentage of pay and also the compensation structure.
I think that we just need to be transparent about that because to talk about the overall percent when the top people are getting 3 or 4 times that much is a percent subject us to criticism if we don't explain it.
Yeah, I think that is something that we can certainly address going forward. But well noted. I don't have the page numbers, but it is articulated, and you can see that 11 SLTs got $206,000, and then the rest, the rest of the rank and file got. I haven't done the average, but it does make sense what you've just said.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea. Just if we want to maintain credibility in the plan, we should be very transparent about that kind of stuff.
Agreed.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
Madam Chair, I had a question, if you will. And we may get to this, but my question is there any, I hadn't heard any information with regard to retirement benefits and deferred compensation. Is that something that is different from the CEO and the rest of the employees? I know that there may be some non-discrimination issues. I hadn't heard anything about what is attended to the CEO's package and how that compares with the rest of the workforce.
We had not incorporated that into our dialogue at the workshop. It was really specifically identified around the pay for performance issue. Okay. But I think that as we go into our CEO search, that's obviously something that we all need to address.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Angie, was it you that referenced other municipalities have incentive programs? Can you tell me who within the city of Jacksonville? What entities have programs, and do we know what their percent of pay is?
Okay. I'll defer to Pat because she has that information available. But there are other municipalities, but I'm not quite sure what their percentage is. So Pat, would you have that information available?
Marty, I don't have that immediately available, but we can get that for you.
Yeah, I think that in the confines of this conversation, that would be that'd be helpful for me.
And to just underline the question you asked was not the question that was answered. You asked about within the city of Jacksonville. I don't think there are any other bonus programs. Certainly there isn't at the port, and I don't know of any in the other city departments. Is that accurate or is that inaccurate?
This is Pat. The city of Jacksonville, within their appointed pay plan, they do actually have that they provide incentives, but it's not the same type of program that we have. And I don't know about the port or JEA immediately.
Why don't we allow staff to do some research around that? I think it's something I'm curious about as we continue our conversations on pay for performance.
Okay, we've made note of that.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Marty, Joe again. So for transparency, for whatever the compensation package is, sort of getting back to Councilmember Salem's concern about everybody having visibility to that and all that, in the past, was that sort of part of the submitted within the budget where folks could see what it was, or because I'm just not sure how that was included or accounted for in the past.
Yeah, I'll pass it to Paul, but I did ask Paul that question. And if you think through the way we pay it, it's based on cost save. So what the answer I think is going to be that it's hard to project what that could be, which is why I asked for the depiction in the graph in our package, because it certainly could be that we represent the average of the last 3 years. But Paul, why don't you take that one from where I started?
Thank you. So it's accurate. There is not a line item in the budget. Has not been a line item in the budget. And the intent there is that there is no payout unless there's savings created between the budgeted operating and maintenance expense budget and actual performance. So it is monitored and communicated to the employees during the year. And as we get closer to the end of the year into September, there might be a projection if there's savings to go ahead and approve for accounting purposes an amount, which would be paid out subsequently. So in terms of clarity of presentation, up until and the last time we did it would have been in December of 17, there was a full transparent presentation of the plans, the new plans, and the goals and objectives to the board. And then there was also a request of the board to release payments once the evaluation has been made against the performance of the plan. Now, the action taken in 17 would have changed that, would not include the CEO to participate in that, but at least the CEO would have been the one that approved the plans and approved the payouts prospectively. It then got sideways, and the CEO put himself in the plan and paid himself out. So I think that's the history. So historically, the balance was, and the thinking was of management at the time, if we put a budgeted line item in there, then of $3 million or some average amount, then there's an expectation that becomes part of permanent compensation and it's there to be delivered. Absent that, with a zero starting the game, there is an incentive to create that, and there was a good bit of momentum in the organization, at least in my time there, to pursue those goals and objectives to get that payout.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Paul.
And Joe, in the business world, we would handle that a little bit differently, right? We would have a not to exceeds or at management's discretion, or we would cap what we were paying because we'd be accruing for those that payment. So I think that's something relative to transparency, we can review as we move forward. But I think it's important for us to disclose in our budget process that we've paid these on average, but they've also averaged out at a certain savings rate. And maybe we move in if we continue down this path, move in that it will not exceed X, or it's the average, it will not exceed the average of the past 3 years or something along those lines.
No, all makes sense, Marty. Thank you.
Any other thoughts? And again, we're all problem solvers, and I think we're all in our heads probably trying to wrap our heads around a solution. But this really is a workshop, so we'll have the opportunity to address specific solutions going forward. I think it is important for us to understand the statute. So, Jody, can I turn that over to you? Jody, are you double muted?
Yeah, sorry about that. I lost power during this meeting, so I lost my video feed, but I have my phone on AT&T. So if you lose the video of me, I'll still have you on my phone.
Jody,
thank you, Madam Chair.
Jody, can we clarify you're a Clay County customer?
I am Clay County Utility. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And it's storming
Madam
here.
Chairman. Madam Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I got a note from Councilman Salem saying he's on the phone and would like to make a statement.
Before we get through the full agenda, in a workshop, Jody, I presume that's possible.
It's up to you. It's at the discretion of the chair if you want to entertain a comment at this time, or you want to wait until after I describe the statute. It's up to you.
Does the wonderful councilman have a time constraint? Can he wait till we get it through the statute?
He is motioning that he can wait.
Oh, good. Thank you. Let's get through this statute, and then would love to hear from Ron.
It'll be very brief, Madam Chair. The statutory program, the 215-425 subpart 3, was put into place in 2011. Prior to 2011, governments, counties, municipalities, and special districts had the ability to adopt resolutions or ordinances for a pay-for-performance program or a bonus program, and there weren't any restrictions on that. In 2011, the statute changed to provide restrictions on a bonus program. So anything that you contemplate, any kind of program JEA puts into place, has to meet the statutory restrictions. And there's 4 of them. Any plan has to base the award of a bonus on work performance. And that highlighted section, it's about midway down the subpart 3 is what I'm going to be talking to about provision A, that it has to be based on work performance. You have to describe the performance standards and the evaluation process by which the bonus will be awarded. You have to notify all the employees of your policy before beginning the evaluation period of the bonus so that they know the rules of the game. And you have to consider all employees for the bonus. So any program you do put in place, any policy that the board adopts for a bonus, and I hate that the statute uses bonus scheme, but that word's in there. I always say bonus program. But any bonus program has to meet these elements of the statute. And they're not too restrictive, but just be mindful that they do exist, and any program has to follow the statute. Any questions?
Jody, on section 2, I can't understand that, but it sounds like it only applies to a public hospital.
Yes, sir. That highlighted section, I highlighted too much when I turned this materials in. That does not apply. It dropped down to subpart 3. I am sorry that got highlighted, and that was my error in a haste to get materials out. So it's just subpart 3, A, B, C, and D.
Got it. Thanks.
So any other questions on the statute? There's one more item, Ron, that I'd like to cover, which is that unfortunately, as I was digging and Paul was answering questions about the pay for performance plan, and I'm mindful that this might be the first time our rank and file hear what I'm getting ready to say, but it appears that a plan for this current year was never formally authorized or approved by the CEO, or was never presented to the board of directors. Is that correct, Paul?
That is correct, unfortunately.
So regardless of our actions today, I mean, in the future, based on our knowledge of what we find out in this workshop, regretfully at this juncture, we don't even operate a pay for performance program for this current year. And how we choose to address that is certainly a subject that we should entertain going forward, but I thought it was important for us to first have this workshop to discuss the program in general. Is that fair?
Yes. I have a question, Madam Chairman.
Yes, sir.
It says in sub item C, it says you need to notify all employees of the policy, ordinance, rule, or resolution before the beginning of the evaluation period on which a bonus will be based. And we are right before mid-year. Jody, are we precluded for having a bonus for the last 6 months?
Through the Madam Chair to Mr. Baker, I don't believe that there's no time restrictions in those restrictive provisions that I just read. Historically, it's been on an annual review, an annual basis, but I don't think there's any prohibition against doing a half a year or a quarter year if that would be a policy decision that the board would need to make.
Thank you.
So, Paul, anything to add?
I would just say we thought about that alternative that Mr. Baker raised in his question, and there is the possibility, I think, in terms of meeting the statutes, to have something available for the last quarter, and that would give an appropriate time for the development communication, and in this case, I would strongly recommend board approval. I think in terms of closing out, one of the things that we've had the opportunity to listen to, and I did a poor job introducing Angie Hires. Angie Hires is the first person I hired when I was first came on as CEO, understanding the need to develop a more professional workforce and really employment strategy and HR competency within JEA. And Angie has done a terrific job. And in fact, the city used to try to recruit her when we would go over there and meet and complain or share any of the capacity and programs that we had. So, and Pat Malice has worked and developed HR programs for more years than she would like for me to admit. Prior to that, some of the record keeping and going these two individuals joining our company, our HR people came from the engineering department, and so we have a lot of confidence in terms of when Angie and Pat and others that we brought in the HR community of JEA really reflect the actual activities of compensation studies, and market analysis, and what we can and can't deliver in our environment. But I think a couple of things I heard that clearly would be open to, if we move forward and starting to think about solving or going forward, would be certainly to move back to board approval, capping the total plan. I think the paid for by savings, but with some type of communication in the budget process. I think it really is important to talk in terms of a range, 2 to 10% or whatever that might be. We've got to look and see where there are other incentive programs within the city, and that we should note in the budget process. I mean, the year after we make the payout, at least bring that to the council auditor or others at the city, so they're fully aware. But that's my comments, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councilman Salem, are you available?
You unmute me? Can you hear me? Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you, Madam.
Wait a minute, we lost you.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me, and thank you, Chair Baker, for responding to my text. I just wanted to make a few points, if I could, and answer a couple questions that have come up, because I've done quite a bit of research on this. The city of Jacksonville, by ordinance, has a bonus program where if an employee submits a cost savings idea and it comes to fruition, the mayor has the discretion of rewarding that employee. It's not by any means a broad-based plan. In terms of the authorities, the JEA has a bonus plan. It's approximately 2% of their salary. The CEO has never participated in that plan. And as you know, Ms. Lanahan, we've talked about the JEA being a state, city, quasi-organization. I looked at their plan. I'm pleased with their plan. In terms of one of my ideas that y'all talked about a little bit that I want to clarify, what I'm looking for is your budget to be submitted to the city as it is today, and your bonus plan to be submitted to the city, which is presently not occurring. And there could be, your bonus plan has paid roughly $4 to $7 million a year over the last several years. So one could budget approximately that amount. What I'm looking for is the council auditor staff to review that plan, make sure the cost savings that may be accrued through the JEA employees are appropriate savings, that someone outside your organization is looking at that plan, verifying all the operational or maintenance savings are all real savings potentially. Because I've heard a lot of discussion over the years, and as you know, I'm pretty attuned to city stuff around here, that salaries have not kept up. In my opinion, a bonus program should not be used to supplement salaries. That's a whole separate situation that should be addressed. A bonus plan should be a bonus plan for true excellence, innovative services, cost savings. So that is what I'm looking for through my ordinance, is all of that to go to the city. And I have worked very hard to see if we could make tweaks through the charter versus going to a referendum. And I have been turned down at every turn in terms of making what I want to happen through the charter versus going through the referendum process. So I don't take that lightly. I just think with what has happened over the last year or two, I think we need more oversight over this plan. And to answer Mr. Baker's comment, yes, some of the senior staff got as much as 10% of their salary in that bonus program. So it's not a small piece. For a lot of employees, it is down to that 2% range, but for a lot of people, it's substantially more than that. And I do concur with the discussion that, in my opinion, compensation should never leave the board. It left it when in Paul's tenure earlier, and it left it clearly under Mr. Zahn, which led to the development of the long-term care or PUP plan, and we all know what happened there. So my goal is to set up the organization for the future 5-10 years from now. I co-sponsored all 7 of you when you came through the city council. I was one of 2 council people that did that. I have complete confidence in this board in doing the right thing. Unfortunately, this board will start changing in 2 years. And in 4 years, it'll be substantially different, which is the reason I think the ordinance is appropriate. So thank you for that time. I did want to clarify those points. Thank you, Chair, for that time. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your comments. I'm just trying to figure out why you didn't try to text me, because I would have responded to your text as well.
Well, Marty, interestingly, I must not have saved your phone number, because I went through my phone several times looking for your number, and either I misspelled your last name or did something. I don't know what I did, so that's my fault.
Well, that makes you even more in trouble with me, but we'll resolve that.
So you need to send me your contact information again.
I will do it. I'm glad I asked.
Yes.
You know, Ron, we've had this conversation, and I'm very appreciative, A, that you brought this up early in this board's tenure, B, that you've been proactively thinking about solutions. And, you know, I did push back a little bit on, well, what about the board's responsibility? Isn't this the board's responsibility to set compensation? So I understand the direction that you're going in. And I just think that if we include the plan in our budget that we present to City Council, and we identify what we're going to be putting in, that gives City Council the ability and the auditor to weigh in every year, regardless of whether I'm here or John's here or Dr. Haley's here. It just creates a better process than the process that we've had heretofore.
May I respond?
Of course.
We cannot direct the JEA to do that in your budget. I have explored every way that I know how to include that in your charter to ensure that does occur when I'm off the council 10 years from now. That's the problem, that a future board or a future CEO may not feel like you do and like Paul does. We had one. And that's what worries me. As a steward of the city, I've identified a problem and I'm trying to solve it for the long term. I know it's solved for the short term with this board, but it's the long term that I'm concerned about. But I hear you loud and clear, and I wish we could figure out a way, and I've tried every way that I know of through the OGC to do that. So we may just disagree.
No, and
Madam Chair,
yes, sir, Mr. Baker.
can I ask Jody a question?
Yes.
Why can't we put something in our charter as a board that goes right to his issues?
Are you talking about the city council charter, chapter 21, or do you mean your board governance documents?
The JEA charter.
Well, if you put something in the JEA charter to address the issues, what would prevent another board from changing that later on? I guess that would be one issue to consider. you could, do something within your, the board governance documents that we're all looking at, to express the idea of a pay for performance and how it would work through the board governance process. But would that address Councilman Salem's concerns that another board would come in and potentially change it when you guys are gone?
And, we're all smart people, and I just believe that there is a solution, and I totally understand, Ron, Councilman, your issues and your concerns. And I have the same concerns for the ratepayers. For it's not just the city of Jacksonville. We've got ratepayers in different counties that we are responsible to report to as well. So,
and Marty, can I say one other thing?
Yes, sir.
I have another job, as you know. I have a short-term incentive plan and a long-term incentive plan. I'm in the private sector with those. I am extremely supportive of bonuses. Bonuses on the municipal side are new to me, but as I've looked at this, I think there's a value here. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to stifle or change or kill the bonus plan. I do think it needs significantly more oversight, though.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the issue for me.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair,
can I ask Dr. Faison?
Yes,
Madam Chair, can I ask a question? Councilman, just as a point of clarification, did I understand you to say that per your research that there are other bonus plans at JEA and at the port?
No, there is not. No, there's not one at the port. There is one at JEA, and Dr. Faison, as you might not know, the other three authorities are state city entities, and the city council's ability to regulate or those other three are much more limited than the JEA. We have more control, influence over the JEA than the other three, which is why we can change your charter. And as you might know, through Councilman Boylan's committee, we are making many changes to your charter on employee contracts, on procurement. All of those are in response to what happened over the last year. Every one of them.
Right. So towards that end, in relation to JEA, do they include what it is that you're asking to be included for us to consider in the future? Do they include any kind of ordinance that would give the city council that kind of authority to review those along with the auditors?
I can't do it because of their state city structure. I'm not able to do it for them.
Understood.
That's the issue. Thank you.
And Joe, I think you raised your hand.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. I just like to, so with John Baker's comment, what I think is something to consider, at least if the compensation issue is addressed in the JEA board policy manual, Roger, new boards can change it, but it'd take a deliberate action for one, which is better than what we've got now. So at least if some reason they decide to go down that path, it would still have to take some necessary deliberate actions, which all stakeholders would notice. So it's something better than what we've got now, at least. Just a comment. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Can I ask one more question just for clarification? In terms of how the process exists now, is the current process, does it allow the CEO to be able to implement the program without board approval?
The board has to approve any pay for performance plan.
Not presently.
That was my question. Presently.
Today, that's not correct. I believe Ms. Lanahan I think Paul may address that. That authority was given to the CEO in January of 2019.
Yeah, and that was what I asked, because then to Chair Baker's point, that would put at least some impediment from the CEO unilaterally being able to go in and do that. It does put some stopgap. It may not meet, Councilman, I hear your concern. It may not rise to that level, but at least it would put some stopgap beyond what currently exists, which again gives the CEO this unilateral, access to do that.
And Paul, so that I'm clear, he may have been given the authority, but there was no presentation of goals in front of the board of directors, and therefore there was no plan approved in 19 or 20, because the board has to approve the goals for the plan. Is that a correct statement?
Well, he did not approve a plan for fiscal 20, the year that we're in now, which would have been approved. It needed to be approved by October 1st of 2019 for the year October 1st, 2019 through September 30th. So there's no documentation of any approval of any plan, either from the CEO, subsequent CEO, or the board. There was a plan that was approved back for fiscal 19, so that would have been approved by October 1st of 2018 through September 30th of 2019. That's the year that he put himself in the plan and paid himself out. So prior to that, the board approved the program for the fiscal year starting in October 1st, 17 through 18, when I exited. But the documentation now clearly gives the CEO the right, as Councilman Selm points out, the documentation right now gives the CEO the powers, if you will, to establish an incentive program and to award the payout.
Right.
And that's
in my prior board experience, we always approved the plan in advance.
Yes.
So this is something new as of 19, which I believe we can claw back.
Right.
Yeah.
And so through the chair, that was what my inquiry was if it exists now that the CEO can unilaterally take that action, that certainly is something that to John's point that maybe we should roll back and looking at our governance charter.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to remind everybody, as we've come up on our time, that this was intended to be a workshop so that we could have this conversation with full transparency with regard to the Sunshine Law. It's been helpful to me. I hope it's been helpful to everybody else. And I don't believe at this juncture, we can't really problem solve because we're not going to bring any action items to a workshop. We have to do that in the June meeting. So, Chairman Baker, I'll defer to you on next steps, but I would volunteer as finance chair to work through this issue and potentially present some solutions at the June board meeting, if that is, if that's appealing to you.
It's very appealing to me. Thank you.
And I will commit, Councilman Salem, to discuss in detail with you what we think we might be able to present, because I obviously would want you to be involved in that dialogue. And candidly, I think you know more about the incentive plan at this juncture than probably anybody. Oh, love that.
Particularly the pup. I know more about the pup than anybody.
Well, thankfully, we don't care about the pup. That's the past, my friend, and we are focused on the future.
I hear you.
So any questions or comments before I call for any new business? Anything else anybody wants to say?
Madam Chair, this is Jody Brooks again. Just real quick, I got asked a question about whether or not we could do a mid-year or quarterly plan, and I want to do a little bit of legal research on that particular point. I don't believe, based upon just my clear reading of the provisions of the statute that I read, that I want to make sure there's not some other illegal opinion or something that would require some kind of an annualized plan moving forward. I don't believe there is, but just let me check that box. So I wanted to just let you know, we'll do a little bit of research on that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jody. And, I referenced the rank and file earlier. They're 1,900-ish to 2,000 associates who have been receiving pay for performance plan bonuses for years now. And I'm disappointed that while the past board was talking about PUPs, that they didn't address this issue head on. And I want to apologize to the rank and file that we're in this position right now. And I appreciate their confidence in us in solving this problem go forward, especially in light of the fact that I heard Councilman Salem say he's very supportive of these plans. I think we all are. We just need to make sure we get it right for today and going forward to the future. Is there any other new business to come before the board in this workshop? All right, hearing none, I will adjourn the meeting with the notice that the next board meeting is on June 23rd. And Paul, quick question on that. Do you anticipate us being in person for that meeting, or are we still going to be electronic?
We're going to see how the soft opening goes next week. And so give me a week and then we can figure that one out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I was just curious. I want to see you guys. All right. Well, then we will stand adjourned. I want to thank everybody for their hard work on this issue, and I'll report back at the June board meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marty.
Bye.